76 years ago, in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, a 3-year-old girl vanished right in front of her own home, disappearing without a trace, leaving her family plunged into despair and the entire town shrouded in fear. Police suspected the neighbor living next door was involved, but they found no body or any evidence, and the investigation ultimately stalled. Yet, for decades, that mother never gave up hope, believing that one day the truth would be found. Then one morning in 2006, when a female investigator reopened the old file, she discovered a detail that everyone had overlooked: a small blood sample in a glass vial, the key to unlocking the case forgotten for nearly 6 decades. Before diving deep into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love journeys to reclaim justice like this, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Jacksonville Beach, Florida, spring of 1949. The peaceful coastal town nestled between white sand dunes and low pine groves, where most residents were shipyard workers, fishermen, and young families. The neighborhood along 12th Avenue South back then consisted of just a few dozen one-story wooden houses with tin roofs reflecting the pale yellow streetlights. Dr. Edward Chen, the first Chinese-origin physician practicing in the area, lived here with his wife Grace, a nurse at the local clinic, and their 3-year-old daughter Sarah Madeline Chen. They were known as a quiet, reserved family, always opening their door to neighbors for free medical checkups on weekends. On an early May evening, after a simple dinner, Grace washed dishes in the kitchen, while Edward read the afternoon paper. Sarah played with her cloth doll beside the dining table, her red coat draped over the back of a chair. Outside, the sea breeze gently rustled through the palm fronds, and the distant sound of waves mingled with radio music from the neighbor's house. When the wall clock struck 9:30, Mrs. Elena Vance, the neighbor next door, tapped lightly on the window, gesturing that she wanted back the milk cup she had lent that afternoon. Sarah ran to get the cup, insisting on returning it herself. The little girl put on her red coat, carefully stepping along the sandy path connecting the two houses. The porch light cast down on the speckled sand, then her small figure gradually disappeared behind the wooden fence. A few minutes passed, and in the kitchen, only the sound of running water remained. When Grace called for her daughter, there was no answer. She stepped out onto the porch, called again, still silence. Edward left his chair, walked around the yard, shining a light into the alley behind. The milk cup lay shattered on the step, the back door ajar, and in the dark yard, only the breeze stirred with the scent of sea salt. The couple searched around the house, along the fence, then all the way to the sandy path leading to the beach. But there was no sign of Sarah. The small, quiet yard suddenly felt alien, the porch light flickering on the empty sand. When all possibilities of searching nearby were exhausted, Edward returned to the living room, picked up the receiver of the rotary phone, and reported to the police switchboard that their daughter had vanished. The call was logged at the Duval County Sheriff's Office switchboard and immediately forwarded to the duty department. Less than 40 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up in front of the wooden house on 12th Avenue South. The headlights shone directly on the empty yard, highlighting the disturbed sandmarks near the steps. Detective Harold Dempsey, in charge of the coastal area, got out with 2 officers, instructing nearby residents to keep their distance and turn off some porch lights to avoid blurring evidence. He noted the initial scene, the back door ajar, lock and frame intact, no signs of forced entry or struggle. Inside the house, everything was tidy, with a few porcelain shards from the milk cup on the floor near the kitchen door. Dr. Edward Chen stood silently by the telephone table, while Grace Chen sat in the living room chair, hands clasped tightly, face stunned. Dempsey asked briefly about the last time the child was seen, the clothes she was wearing, and the direction she went toward the backyard. He jotted down every detail in his notebook, then signaled the 2 officers to check along the fence for traces. Under flashlight beams, they discovered small footprints parallel to adult shoe prints, deeply imprinted in the sand, leading to the alley toward the beach. Dempsey measured with a ruler, estimated the adult shoe size, had it photographed, then returned inside. When asked, Grace said Sarah was only going to return the cup to the neighbor, a distance of less than 10 meters. She heard no screams or cries. The only witness was Mrs. Elena Vance, the next-door neighbor, who was brought to the scene. She confirmed that about 15 minutes before police arrived, she had seen a tall man wearing a dark leather jacket and wide-brimmed hat, carrying a little girl in a red coat, walking through the narrow alley toward the sea. She couldn't see his face clearly because it was dark and the streetlight was dim. Dempsey requested a detailed statement, considering this the first important lead. After completing the recording, he called the center to report no evidence of forced entry. Most likely the child was led away by a stranger. The request for additional manpower was approved that very night. Patrol teams were assigned around the coastal neighborhood, sweeping every alley and along the beachfront. A preliminary description of Sarah was distributed to all units. 3-year-old girl, black hair, about 1 meter tall, wearing a red coat, white cloth sandals. By nearly midnight, the sea wind blew strongly, and the footprints in the sand began to fade. Dempsey had a crime scene diagram drawn up, cordoning off a 2-mile radius around the victim's home, including the eastern beach and the southern marsh. All initial data was entered into a newly opened file, temporarily coded at the Duval County Sheriff's Office under the classification missing with suspected kidnapping elements. The official search was launched from that point. The next morning, the search expanded with the participation of over 30 police officers, Navy personnel from Mayport Base, and dozens of volunteer residents from the neighborhood. The beachfront area was divided into multiple sections, each team responsible for sweeping a separate zone. The temporary forensic team set up a command tent near the victim's home, using topographic maps to mark wind direction and tidal currents. Navy forces brought wooden boats, scanning along the shoreline, while other groups used floodlights, small shovels, and probing rods to check every patch of sand. Trails leading to the southern marsh were also searched simultaneously. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone worked in silence, hearing only the steady crash of waves and radio commands. By mid-morning, an officer discovered additional fresh shoe prints near the edge of the sand, about 200 meters from the Chen house. Large shoe size, rubber sole, in the same direction as the prints recorded the previous night. Beside them were smaller footprints, suspected to be a child's, running parallel then abruptly stopping near the water's edge. Dempsey arrived, ordered photographs and remeasurement of the distances between prints. From stride length and sand depression, he concluded the adult was carrying the child rather than walking voluntarily together. A few meters from that spot, the search team found a small, glistening object half buried in the sand. When picked up, they recognized it as a thin silver necklace engraved with 3 letters, SMC, matching the initials of Sarah Madeline Chen. The evidence was documented on site, placed in a sealed bag, and temporarily numbered in the catalog. Police continued combing the area, but besides the necklace, no other items belonging to the victim were found. No torn clothing, no blood stains, no signs of struggle. The southern marsh was thoroughly checked. Tracking dogs sniffed along the reed-covered paths, but detected no unusual scents. That morning's tide rose higher than normal, wind pushing water deeper inland, erasing many remaining traces. Dempsey ordered the weather conditions clearly noted in the report for future reference. By noon, the Navy rescue team returned, reporting no suspicious floating objects within half a mile offshore. Local police coordinated with fishermen to check drag nets, also finding nothing unusual. A few residents said they saw vehicle headlights moving slowly on the small road toward the highway the previous night, but no one remembered the license plate or specific details. This information was recorded as a reference. That afternoon, the first summary meeting was held at the temporary command post. Dempsey presented the results. The only evidence was the engraved necklace, footprints and shoe prints heading toward the sea. No evidence of accident or falling into water. He assessed the highest probability that Sarah was lured or forcibly taken away from the area by a stranger. The entire search perimeter was maintained until new investigative leads emerged. Sand trace samples, the necklace and crime scene photographs were transferred to the Duval County Sheriff's Office Technical Lab for analysis. As night fell, Atlantic winds rose again, erasing the last remaining traces on the beach. The search temporarily concluded under patchy floodlights, with the official report stating, "Victim not found, limited evidence, final direction of movement undetermined." The next morning, as the search was temporarily suspended due to strong winds, the Duval County Sheriff's Office Criminal Technical Team was dispatched to take over the scene for evidence collection and examination. Under Detective Harold Dempsey's direction, the area around the Chen family home was temporarily cordoned off with police tape. Specialists in white protective suits used wooden stakes to mark each location of suspicious traces. All activities were documented, photographed, and incorporated into the crime scene diagram for the case file. At the back porch area, where the milk cup was broken, a technician discovered a red fabric fiber caught on a wooden nub at the edge of the fence. Observation under a magnifying glass showed it was a wool thread detached from coat material, matching the color of the jacket the witness described the victim wearing on the evening of the disappearance. The evidence was picked up with tweezers, placed in a glass tube sealed with a cotton stopper, and temporarily coated. A few steps away, on the remaining sand, a small piece of glass mixed with soil reflected faint light. Preliminary analysis showed the glass shard had thickness equivalent to the side of the milk cup, proving it belonged to the item the victim was holding before disappearing. Dempsey ordered the survey range expanded another 10 meters toward the alley. There, the technical team collected a thin, light blonde hair stuck on the top of a fence post. The Chen family all had black hair, so this hair sample was considered the first important detail, suggesting the presence of another person at the scene. Near the previously discovered shoe print location, an examiner used a small knife to scrape a layer of dark sand mixed with faint red streaks. When performing an on-site rapid test with Kastle-Meyer reagent, the sample turned pink, positive reaction for human blood indicators. The entire portion of sand containing the red streak was collected, placed in a sealed paper bag, temporarily labeled Sample Number 4. The remaining samples, fabric fiber, hair, glass shard, were sequentially numbered, placed in a specialized aluminum box for transfer to the technical lab. Before leaving, Dempsey ordered clear recording of temperature, weather, and wind direction in the report to ensure environmental conditions were accurately noted for later analysis. All evidence collected in the first 2 days was resealed in a common container, affixed with a validation seal, and transferred to the Duval County Sheriff's Office examination room in downtown Jacksonville that same afternoon. 3 days later, preliminary test results were sent back to the scene. The blood in the sand was determined to be Group O, not matching the blood type of any Chen family member. The red fabric was confirmed as industrially woven wool, same type as children's coats produced domestically at that time. The blonde hair lacked sufficient root for blood type testing, but microscopic analysis showed it was adult human hair, gender undetermined. The glass shards perfectly matched the composition of the remaining milk cup collected inside the house. Dempsey read the examination summary and ordered the technical team to compile a comprehensive report. In the official report, the initial assessment section stated, "No signs of forced entry at the scene. Evidence indicates the presence of at least 2 individuals, the victim and an unidentified adult. Blood sample Group O proves contact or collision in the fence area. All evidence was recoded under the Sheriff's Office new management system. The diluted blood in the sand was assigned code hash 7B49, becoming the central evidence of the case. All samples and reports were resealed a second time, stored in a specialized preservation vault for additional analyses when needed. Upon completing the crime scene investigation phase, Detective Dempsey submitted the compilation to command. The report confirmed the on-site blood source did not belong to the victim or family, highly likely from an unidentified male. From this point, the case was officially classified under kidnapping with assault elements, and all information obtained during examination was transferred to the official investigation file of the Duval County Sheriff's Office. After completing the crime scene examination report, Detective Harold Dempsey shifted focus to screening the surrounding residential area to identify potential persons of interest. He and two administrative officers proceeded to check the registered resident list for Jacksonville Beach and temporary residency records of room renters within a 2-mile radius from the Chen family home. The roster provided by local authorities showed the area had a total of 47 permanent households, mostly shipyard workers, electricians, carpenters, and resort maintenance staff. Additionally, there were 8 short-term renters in small houses along the coastal road. The list was divided into groups: permanent residents, long-term renters, and temporary residents. Dempsey ordered cross-checking between tax records, residency declarations, and work permits to eliminate unremarkable cases. During the screening, 2 names were prominently flagged. The first was Robert Mullins, 34 years old, electrician, living with his wife and 2 children in the house, immediately north of the Chen family. Mullins was acquainted with the victim, having helped repair the electrical system in their home the previous month. Several neighbors confirmed he often visited the Chen house in the evenings to check light bulbs or assist with minor tasks. The other name was Christian Bruckner, 28 years old, German nationality, freelance mechanic. He rented a small room behind an abandoned auto repair shop on Atlantic Boulevard, about 1 mile from the scene. Bruckner's temporary residency record noted he had been in Jacksonville for over 3 months. No relatives, no other fixed address. Background information was sparse, no valid work permit, only listed as mechanic and doing odd jobs for local fishermen. Dempsey carefully read the entire summary and decided to prioritize investigating Robert Mullins first. The reason was very clear. Mullins was the only person with a direct acquaintance relationship with the Chen family, frequently visiting the house and living right next to the scene, making him the first to be ruled out. Meanwhile, the name Christian Bruckner was only noted as foreigner, temporary resident, with no specific basis for deeper consideration, so he was temporarily placed lower. In a short meeting with his colleagues, Dempsey directed clearly, start with those acquainted with the victim, verify alibis before expanding the investigation to unknown subjects. The very next morning, that decision was implemented. The interrogation of Robert Mullins was conducted in the interview room of the Duval County Sheriff's Office, presided over by Detective Harold Dempsey himself, along with a recording clerk. Mullins appeared in work clothes, his face showing fatigue, but maintaining a cooperative attitude. He confirmed he came in response to the summons, not under detention. Dempsey's first question revolved around the time he left home on the evening of the disappearance. Mullins stated clearly, he left home around 9 o'clock, walked to the Seaside Inn bar half a mile away, where his group of electrician co-workers usually gathered at the end of the day. According to him, they sat at the corner table near the counter, leaving the bar around 11. Upon returning home, he saw police cars parked in front of the Chen house and learned the child was missing. Dempsey requested the names of those present at the bar to verify the alibi. That same afternoon, the investigation team was dispatched to the Seaside Inn. The bar owner and 2 regular customers confirmed seeing Mullins that evening. The server even clearly remembered him ordering beer and a sandwich at 9:20. The bar's cash register log also recorded an order, matching the statement. These details solidified evidence that Mullins was at the bar during the time Sarah Chen disappeared. Dempsey cross-checked travel times. From Mullins' house to the bar took about 10 minutes on foot, with no sufficient gap for him to commit kidnapping, move the victim, and return to the bar in such a short window. Meanwhile, the technical team conducted a search of Mullins' house to rule out the possibility of concealing evidence. Results showed no traces of blood, hair, or red fabric fibers matching the scene. His truck was also examined, with no unusual signs found. Dempsey noted the suspect's cooperative attitude. He allowed a full search of his property without a warrant. Mullins' personal file was pulled from archives, showing no prior convictions, only a few minor administrative violations related to unauthorized electrical work. However, within the investigation team, there were still opinions that Mullins might be indirectly involved or know something. Dempsey decided to conduct a second interview to clarify details about the relationship between the two families. Mullins stated he had known the Chen family for nearly a year, often helping with repairs and occasionally having coffee with Dr. Edward Chen on weekends. He had never been alone with Sarah and had no reason to visit their house on the evening of the incident. When asked about the strange man the neighbor had seen, Mullins said he had never seen anyone matching the description around the neighborhood. This statement was recorded and cross-checked with prior witness information. Dempsey spent considerable time cross-verifying details in Mullins' statements. Everything matched the actual data collected: payment time at the bar, witness confirmations, and walking route. After 2 days of verification, he concluded Mullins had a clear alibi and no factors directly linking him to the scene evidence. In the report to superiors, Dempsey clearly stated, "No contradictions found in statements, no biological traces or evidence links." Temporarily rule out Robert Mullins from the suspect list. However, ruling out Mullins left the investigation in a void. Others in the neighborhood all had alibis or no access to the scene. Search teams still found no new traces on the beach or in the marsh. The map analyzing possible suspect movement directions was filled with arrows ending in question marks. Dempsey spent hours reviewing files, cross-referencing every statement, but found no viable leads. In the weekend internal meeting, he reported the situation: Mullins verified innocent, no direct suspects, no determined means of transport if the victim was taken from the area. Command ordered a temporary halt to broad pursuits and focus on remaining evidence. The case, initially launched urgently with dozens involved, began to slow as information sources dried up. On Dempsey's desk, the file named Sarah Madeline Chen remained open. Crime scene photos pinned next to the Group O blood examination report, the only evidence still holding value. No viable suspects, no new witnesses, no signs of the victim. The official investigation entered its first deadlock phase since the girl's disappearance. The final 1949 forensic examination report was sent to Detective Harold Dempsey's desk in early September, nearly 4 months after Sarah Chen's disappearance. The file was less than 20 pages thick, accompanied by blood, fabric, hair, and glass test result tables. The report began with the assessment: samples collected at the scene indicate contact between 2 individuals, but insufficient data to identify the blood donor. The detailed conclusion stated the blood in the sand had slight decomposition due to humidity and high temperature, only sufficient to determine Group O. Cross-analysis with blood samples from Dr. Edward Chen, Grace Chen, and Sarah, all Group A, showed the collected sample did not belong to any family member. This was the only valuable finding, but not strong enough to trace a specific subject. The lab also sent results on the blonde hair found on the fence. Under microscope, hair characteristics matched an adult, likely male based on shaft diameter, but lacking the root, blood type, or enzyme testing was impossible. At that time, DNA technology did not exist, so the data was stored only as unidentified reference sample. Experts noted that if preserved under stable conditions, the hair and blood could still be reanalyzed with future technology. The silver necklace engraved SMC was thoroughly checked but yielded no new information. No fingerprints, no scratches or skin residue. Metal composition matched standard domestic silver produced 1940, 1948. Common type, untraceable to a specific maker. The report concluded, no distinctive factors to identify owner or external impact. Other samples, including glass shards from the milk cup and red fabric fiber, were confirmed only related to the victim's items and clothing. Dempsey read every page carefully, underlining key sections, then set it down and sighed. In the subsequent internal meeting, he presented that the examination results were insufficient to identify a suspect or new investigative direction. Duval County Sheriff's Office Command agreed to place the case in temporary suspension, pending additional evidence. Administrative procedure required storing all samples and forensic files for readiness to resume if the investigation reopened. The final section of the report listed details of the sealing method and evidence storage location. The blood sample in the sand was officially coded #7B49, placed in a glass vial with a rubber stopper wrapped in moisture-proof aluminum foil. The hair, fabric fiber and glass shard were kept together in a metal box, each type with its own label code. All were sealed in a stiff paper envelope, affixed with the Duval Criminal Technical Room seal, stored in the central evidence vault in the basement of the sheriff's office building. The clerk noted the intake date as September 14, 1949. Dempsey completed the summary report to superiors, summarizing, "No physical evidence confirming violence or suspect identity. Group O blood sample may belong to a stranger, but due to technological limitations, cannot be identified. Recommend transferring the file to temporary suspension status." The case file Sarah Madeline Chen, missing child, was closed, stamped in red, suspended, awaiting new evidence. In the following days, the Duval County Sheriff's Office disbanded the search team, retaining only one officer to monitor similar missing persons reports in the area. The Chen family left Jacksonville a few months later, leaving the house empty. Dempsey's final memo that year was just one line: "No leads, no new witnesses, investigation temporarily suspended." In the evidence vault, the box containing blood sample #7B49 was placed deep on a metal shelf alongside hundreds of other unresolved case evidences, awaiting a day to be reopened, when science could answer the questions left open in 1949. 10 years after the Sarah Madeline Chen case file was temporarily suspended, the Duval County Sheriff's Office conducted a periodic inventory of unsolved cases. In the summer of 1959, the file storage area in the basement of the Sheriff's Office building was cleaned. Hundreds of dusty files were pulled for review, categorized by age. The officer in charge of archiving that year was Earl Warren, a careful, meticulous man newly transferred from administration. His task was to screen all files still holding legal value, create a preliminary digital catalog, and identify cases eligible for permanent closure. Among the yellowed stacks, Warren happened upon a folder marked Case 479 Beb Missing Child, 1949. Inside were Detective Harold Dempsey's investigation report, crime scene photos, and a sealed envelope containing evidence stamped 10 years prior. Warren read through the examination minutes and Dempsey's summary. Everything stopped at the conclusion that the Group O blood was unidentified, and all other evidence held no tracing value. The final note recorded the file's transfer to suspended, awaiting further evidence. Under new 1958 regulations, such files could be listed as pending review, if still recoverable, or closed archive, if deemed uncontinuable. Before resealing the documents, Warren reviewed the witness and resident lists from the investigated area. On the page listing 1949 beach area renters, he noticed a name in smudged ink. Different from the rest: Christian Bruckner, mechanic occupation, German nationality, temporary address at Atlantic Boulevard lodging. The note beside it was just one line: left the area, unverified. Warren paused for a few minutes at that name. In other cases he reviewed, almost no name was overlooked without verification results. He cross-checked the period's resident catalog, but found no official registration for Bruckner in tax systems or foreigner declaration logs. A hunch led Warren to pencil in the margin: German national mechanic, potential lid, unverified. However, this note was only for internal reference. At that time, Detective Dempsey had retired. The Jacksonville Beach investigation unit had changed personnel. None of the current officers had participated in the 1949 case, and this file was not prioritized, having exceeded practical statute limits. Upon completing the final statistical table, Warren marked the Chen case under no new evidence, cold file. Per administrative procedure, this meant the case was officially moved to long-term storage, reopenable only with special judicial request or new evidence discovery. On August 14, 1959, he signed the handover log, confirming Case 479B was placed in the third slot of the steel cabinet row, labeled Unresolved Cases, 1940s. Sealed sample #7B49 was inspected, seal intact. No damage signs, then returned to the metal box with other evidences. The concise summary report stated, "No legal basis to continue investigation. No new data from inventory process. File remains as is." Afterward, the less than 25-page document stack was placed in a new envelope, stamped red closed archive, and moved to the low-temperature storage area at the end of the basement hallway. Under pale fluorescent lights, hundreds of file boxes were lined in rows, numbered in white paint, including one small box coded 479B, Chen, Sarah Madeline. Warren finished the day's final task, entering in the duty log, "Inspected, noted filed per regulations." The margin note, "Potential lead unverified," he wrote, on the resident list page, went unnoticed by others. Later, when the sheriff's office switched to electronic filing, those handwritten notes were scanned blurred, mostly unreadable. The disappearance of little Sarah Madeline Chen officially became a cold case. A case with no assigned investigator, no active witnesses, existing only on paper. For many years after, that file lay dormant in the Duval County Sheriff's Office metal vault. Among hundreds of other cases time had turned into silent records of unfinished stories. More than half a century after the Sarah Madeline Chen disappearance file was archived, the Jacksonville Police Department entered a modernization phase with the establishment of the Cold Case Unit in early 2006. The program was federally funded to review unsolved cases recoverable with new forensic technology, especially those retaining biological samples. The goal was to leverage DNA testing advancements to identify suspects in decades-old deadlocked cases. Among hundreds of old cataloged files, forensic investigator Detective Anna Vogue took special note of a thin, yellowed paper folder coded Case 479B, Missing Child. Inside, besides Detective Harold Dempsey's investigation summary, was an entry clearly stating biological sample code #7B49. Sealed, well preserved. This was a rare sign, as most 1940s biological evidence had been damaged or lost. Vogt noted the case for priority, adding, "Sample intact, high potential for ancient DNA extraction." After approval, the evidence unsealing process was conducted under Florida State Criminal Technical Room supervision. The metal evidence box was transferred from Duval County storage to the Florida Central Forensic Laboratory in Tallahassee. Transport was strictly documented, double-sealed, with signatures from both agency representatives. Upon opening, the sealing tape was intact, proving no tampering since 1949 storage. Inside, the glass vial containing the bloodied sand was wrapped in moisture-proof aluminum foil, clearly labeled #7B49. Duval County Evidence, September 1949. The state forensic technician team used an ancient evidence DNA extraction protocol, drying the sample, removing impurities, and employing an improved polymerase chain reaction method to duplicate remaining DNA segments. Due to partial degradation, extraction proceeded slowly and required multiple repetitions. After 3 days of continuous processing, initial results showed the sample contained human DNA, though at low concentration. The next analysis step identified Y chromosome gene sequences, proving the blood donor was male. At the same time, Vogt retrieved all of Dempsey's original reports, reviewing every crime scene detail for cross-reference. She noted in her work log, "Only evidence still capable of providing identification data. Primary witness deceased. Focus on genetic analysis." Vogt also contacted the records office to find information on individuals involved in the 1949 case, but most had died or could not be located. In mid-April 2006, the Tallahassee laboratory sent a preliminary report. Results confirmed blood sample #7B49 contained complete DNA sufficient for entry into the National Combined DNA Index System. The sample was recoded with a new federal standard identification number, retaining the original code plus collection year for tracing. In the accompanying minutes, the lead technician clearly stated, "DNA quality surprisingly stable, indicating excellent sample preservation conditions. Identification possible if matching profile exists in international databases. This discovery was considered the cold case unit's first breakthrough since its establishment. Dempsey, the previous generation's investigator, had noted in his 1949 report that future technology might identify the man who left blood at the scene. Nearly 6 decades later, that assessment proved correct. Vogt considered this one of the rare cases where mid-20th century biological evidence remained viable for genetic testing. On April 21, Vogt submitted a formal proposal to Unit Command, requesting priority tracing of the newly obtained DNA sample. In the memo, she stated, "Chen girl missing 1949 case holds scientific and historical value. Sample #7B49 preserved intact, suitable for international matching process. Recommend comprehensive comparison via CODIS and Interpol systems." The proposal was approved that week. At the cold case office, Vogt carefully backed up all examination data to the secure system and updated the case status to reopened under DNA review. The final lines in the progress report clearly stated, "File reopened after 57 years. Primary evidence, blood sample #7B49. Status, DNA successfully extracted, awaiting comparison." This was the first time since 1949 that the name Sarah Madeline Chen reappeared on the Jacksonville Police Department's active investigation list. The final examination report was completed in early May 2006, confirming successful DNA extraction from the 1949 sealed blood sample. Detailed analysis results showed the gene sequence belonged to a male of European origin, with genetic structure matching Central European populations. Marker segments compared against national archives showed extremely low error rates, qualifying for entry into international criminal databases. The Tallahassee laboratory transferred the entire gene sequence to the FBI's Combined DNA Index system and simultaneously sent copies to Interpol's DNA Gateway network, connecting forensic data across more than 180 member countries. The comparison process ran automatically for hours. Hundreds of thousands of DNA profiles from Europe and North America were scanned, the system automatically flagging a possible match with a sample registered in Germany. The match notification was sent to Jacksonville as a technical report, marked with the line "Hit confirmed, DNA profile, linked to German Federal Criminal Police Office." The subject code in the German database was identified as Christian Bruckner, male born 1919, German citizen, currently serving a prison sentence in Braunschweig for rape and sexual violence offenses. Detective Anna Vogt received this information via the FBI's internal secure communication on May 11th. She immediately requested cross-verification through diplomatic channels with the Bundeskriminalamt, Germany's Federal Criminal Police Office. Less than 2 weeks later, official response arrived. Christian Bruckner's DNA profile was collected in 2001 during a sexual assault case in Hanover, Germany. When compared to Jacksonville 1949, sample #7B49, results matched 2020's LOCI, the highest confirmation level under international forensic standards. The report stated, "Genetic identity confirmed, probability of match 1 in 10 billion. Bruckner's information was forwarded to the cold case unit's background analysis team. Data extracted from U.S. immigration archives showed an individual with a similar name. German nationality, entered at the port of New York in 1948 under a technical labor visa. Then registered temporary residence in Florida. Entry records clearly listed occupation, mechanic, specialized in marine engines. The declared temporary address was a small lodging near Atlantic Boulevard, Jacksonville, matching the location mentioned in the 1949 report. Vogt compiled all old case documents, re-examining every detail. In Detective Dempsey's 1949 renter list near the victim's home, the name Christian Bruckner appeared on line 13, but crossed out in red ink, with the note "left the area, unverified." She realized this was the individual archiving officer Earl Warren had flagged during the 1959 inventory. The match between DNA data and the old file name led Vogt to view this as a decisive breakthrough. For verification, She contacted German civil registry authorities and requested confirmation of Bruckner's migration during the late 1940s. Records there showed Bruckner departed Hamburg in 1948 on a cargo ship to New York, hired as a machinist for a shipping company with offices in Jacksonville. In 1950, he left the United States, returning to Europe via the port of Lisbon. No record showed he was ever arrested or investigated while in America. Afterward, Bruckner's name reappeared in German criminal records from the early 1950s, with multiple convictions for violence and child sexual abuse. Vogt prepared a report to Jacksonville Police Department Command and the FBI, stating, DNA results match between 1949 sample and German prisoner Christian Bruckner. Subject present in Florida at the time of the incident, occupation consistent with scene area. High probability of direct involvement in Sarah Chen disappearance. That same day, the FBI notified the U.S. Department of Justice to initiate international judicial cooperation procedures, paving the way for official information exchange with the BKA. Florida forensic experts added technical observations. The scene blood had low hemoglobin content, indicating a non-serious injury, likely the perpetrator scratched while passing through the fence. Comparison with Bruckner's prison medical records in Braunschweig showed an old scar on his right forearm, formation estimated mid to late 1940s. This physical characteristic match further reinforced the examination results. When compiling all data, Vogt recognized the connection across investigative generations, faint notes in Dempsey's file, Earl Warren's handwritten German mechanic, potential lead, and now DNA confirming the suspect's identity. After 57 years, the final piece of sample hash, 7B49, had a specific name and face. The Cold Case Unit's summary report concluded, 1949 scene DNA fully matches genetic profile of Christian Bruckner, German citizen, resided in Jacksonville, Florida, 1948-1950. This is the first physical evidence confirming suspect presence at the crime scene. Official response from the Bundeskriminalamt arrived in Jacksonville in early June 2006, confirming Christian Bruckner, born 1919 in Bremen, was a repeat offender with convictions in Germany, Austria, and Portugal over 3 decades. The BKA's comprehensive report exceeded 50 pages, detailing his criminal history, including child sexual assaults, rapes, property thefts, and assaults. The first recorded offense was in 1938, when Bruckner, aged 19, was arrested for vehicle theft in Hamburg. After World War II, he moved frequently across Europe, working unstably in mechanical shops, often changing addresses and using aliases to evade pursuit. According to federal police records, Bruckner had a clear modus operandi in his crimes, approaching victims who were children or women living alone in remote residential areas, gaining trust or breaking in suddenly, then committing sexual assault and leaving the scene before detection. In many cases, he left very few traces, only shoe prints or small victim items taken as trophies. The BKA report emphasized, criminal behavior is repetitive, demonstrating control and careful preparation. Subject tends to collect victims' personal items for keepsakes. Notably, in the dossier appendix, the BKA attached a copy of documents provided by Portuguese police regarding a 1952 case in Algarve. The victim was an 8-year-old girl who disappeared while playing near Lagos Beach. Her body was later found in a sandy forest a few miles away. Scene evidence indicated sexual assault, torn clothing, no witnesses. Portuguese police at the time arrested a German mechanic living nearby, but due to lack of evidence, the case was suspended. The man's name, Christian Bruckner. Records noted he left Portugal immediately after release and never returned. The crime method, timing, and geographic characteristics all bore striking similarities to the 1949 Jacksonville Beach incident. Detective Anna Vogt, upon receiving the dossier copy, immediately recognized the overlap between the two investigations. Both cases occurred in coastal areas, victims were young children, scenes showed no clear signs of struggle, and the perpetrator vanished right after discovery. She noted in her assessment to superiors, Bruckner exhibits stable behavioral patterns over a long period, moving across countries but not changing approach methods. Consider possibility he committed similar crimes during 1948, 1955. The identity and DNA match led the U.S. and Germany to open a joint investigation, codenamed Operation Seawind. The U.S. side provided all 1949 Jacksonville case documents, while the BKA screened Bruckner's European criminal records. Initial online meetings were held via Interpol's secure channel, attended by Justice Department representatives from both countries. The cooperation memorandum emphasized the goal: determine Bruckner's direct involvement in the Jacksonville Beach, Florida disappearance through forensic evidence and international crime pattern comparison. Concurrently, the German investigation team began re-examining locations linked to Bruckner. They discovered that in the 1950s, 1960s, he lived in several small Eastern German cities, including Braunschweig, Leipzig, and rural Saxony-Anhalt. Notably, from 1962 to 1970, Bruckner owned a small property in Saxony, consisting of a single-story house and an abandoned repair shop. Local police had recorded the address as a gathering spot for known offenders. After Bruckner's arrest in the early 1980s for rape, the house was abandoned but never thoroughly searched. Upon reanalyzing records, the BKA team noted Bruckner's habit of keeping victims' personal items as trophies. In a 1967 case, police seized a small box at his residence containing rings, earrings, and necklaces from various women. Thus, Germany proposed a search warrant for the old Saxony house to seek potential evidence related to past crimes, including Jacksonville 1949. The search request was submitted to the Braunschweig prosecutor's office on June 24, 2006. After reviewing U.S. files and DNA match results, the office approved the warrant within 2 days. The content stated, "Conduct comprehensive inspection at Christian Bruckner's former registered address to collect legally valuable evidence in international cases." A joint task force of 3 BKA investigators, 2 forensic experts, and an FBI representative in Germany was assigned direct participation. In an internal notice to Jacksonville, Vogue stated, "Suspect Bruckner's profile fully confirmed. Subject has similar criminal history and is still alive. Search warrant for Old Saxony House approved, execution in July." After more than half a century, the investigation into little Sarah Madeleine Chen's disappearance was officially reconnected across 2 continents, starting with a blood sample sealed in a small glass vial, coded #7B49, and now a search warrant, potentially unlocking the entire missing part of a case thought forever forgotten. On July 5, 2006, the joint Bundeskriminalamt and FBI representative task force in Germany began executing the search warrant at Christian Bruckner's old house in Saxony-Anhalt, about 100 kilometers from Braunschweig. The house, built in the 1920s, had red brick walls, black tile roof, and stood isolated on the edge of a sparse forest. Per land records, it had been abandoned since the early 1980s after the owner's rape arrest. Years of vacancy left the property overgrown with weeds, windows boarded, part of the roof collapsed. Outside, a tilted collapse warning sign hung on a rusted fence. The forensic team brought metal detectors, UV lights, and cement core drills to check modified areas. The search began at 8 a.m., supervised by the Braunschweig prosecutor. Rooms were opened sequentially, photographed, and current conditions noted. The old living room had only broken chair frames, thick dust covering the floor. In one wall corner, technicians found a small locked safe without a key. When pried open, it contained only torn documents, a 1965 German newspaper, and a cloth bag with personal items. However, the most important area was the basement, formerly converted into a repair shop. Floorboards were removed, revealing uneven cement with lighter patches. A forensic expert used density measurement to detect a hollow space beneath. After prosecutor approval, the team drilled a small hole and inserted an endoscope camera. Transmitted images showed multiple small metallic reflecting objects in the soil under the floor. Excavation began that day, proceeding layer by layer. After nearly 3 hours, The team recovered 3 main items: a black USB drive, a 16mm film reel wrapped in moisture-proof foil, and a thin silver necklace engraved SMC, wrapped in an old cloth bag. All were collected, documented on-site, tagged, and sealed in specialized bags. When cleaned of dust, the SMC engraving on the necklace was clearly visible, simple uppercase lettering, fully matching the description of the missing evidence from the 1949 Jacksonville case. The chain still had brown rust stains, possibly oxidation or organic residue. After excavation, the items were brought upstairs and preliminarily examined at the scene. The USB, though outwardly aged, was preserved in a sealed plastic case, undamaged by moisture. Digital forensics confirmed 16 GB capacity, containing hundreds of image and video files, mostly related to sexual crimes. All data was immediately copied to BKA servers for later analysis. The 16mm reel, common in the 1940s, 1950s, was sealed in a separate protective canister to prevent light damage. The canister had a faded label reading Summer Beach, 49. This detail drew special attention, matching the Jacksonville Beach case timeline. The search continued into late afternoon. In a western basement wall nook, technicians found another small wooden box with miscellaneous items, women's watches, rings, hair clips, and several faded old photos. Though not yet linked to specific cases, the victim trophy storage pattern matched BKA recorded Brickner behavior. All were collected, sealed, and taken to headquarters. The next day, the evidence was transferred to the BKA Central Examination Room in Wiesbaden. The intake report stated, evidence recovered during search of Christian Brickner's former house, Saxony-Anhalt, July 5, 2006. Includes 1 USB device with images, 2 16mm film reel, 3 silver necklace, engraved SMC, 4 various other personal items. All samples were coded under international standards for forensic analysis. Initially, the BKA Metal Technology Room examined the necklace. Results confirmed the silver alloy matched U.S. workshop products from 1948-1950, especially common consumer lines in Florida at the time. Wear and hand-engraved lettering matched classic techniques used by small jewelry stores. This was key physical evidence supporting the item's American origin, not later collection. Surface analysis detected residual human protein and microscopic fabric fibers extracted and sent to biology for DNA testing. Meanwhile, BKA digital experts recovered USB data. They found numerous images and videos of crimes, mostly from the 1990s, 2000s. Some files were encrypted named, but one folder contained digitized old reel film images. Experts noted several beach frames showing a middle-aged man adjusting a camera, with tropical scenery behind, palm trees, bright sand sea, very similar to Florida. The 16mm reel was processed in the BKA Ancient Image Archive Room. After developing with preservation solution, technicians projected it on a vintage film viewer. In the dim projection room, initial images appeared: a sunny beach, leaning palms, a few small wooden houses, and a little girl in a red coat holding a milk cup walking along a sandy path. The short clip, just dozens of seconds, was enough for the entire team to recognize the astonishing similarity to the 1949 Jacksonville Beach scene description. The canister label, Summer Beach 49, now became undeniable timeline matching evidence. The BKA immediately backed up the entire film, scanned each frame for digital storage, and sent to image analysis. A preliminary report was sent to the U.S., confirming that among evidence seized from Christian Brickner's old house, at least one item, the silver necklace engraved SMC, matched the missing evidence recorded at the 1949 Jacksonville scene, and one film reel shot in a location geographically corresponding to Florida. All evidence was resealed and sent to the BKA Central Biology Examination Room for DNA analysis. Assessing match potential with archive sample hash 7B49. Upon completing inventory, the task force minutes summarized briefly: search completed. recovered evidence potentially related to 1949 international case. Silver necklace engraved SMC, confirmed manufactured in the United States 1948-1950. All evidence transferred to BKA for biological and forensic examination. Christian Bruckner's old house, silent for over 20 years, had now become the focal point of an investigation bridging two sides of the Atlantic. The forensic examination process at the Bundeskriminalamt lasted nearly 2 months, aiming to establish an official link between the evidence seized from Christian Bruckner's old house and the 1949 Jacksonville Beach case. Immediately upon receipt, the criminal biology room extracted samples from the surface of the silver necklace engraved SMC. Under an optical microscope, technicians observed faint light brown streaks around the clasp, identified as dried blood residue and human epithelial cells. The sample was processed using silica-based DNA extraction, suitable for old metal evidence. After 3 repetitions, a complete DNA sequence was obtained, sufficient for database comparison. The genetic data extracted from the necklace was entered into Germany's National Identification System and simultaneously sent to the U.S. for comparison with archived blood sample #7B49 in Jacksonville. Upon receiving the gene file, Florida forensic experts performed STR identity analysis using software. Comparison results showed absolute matches at all genetic loci, including the Y chromosome segment identified in the 2006 sample. This proved the biological material on the necklace and the 1949 seen blood belonged to the same man. The next verification step was conducted at the BKA, comparing this sample with Christian Bruckner's DNA profile, stored in Germany's criminal database since 2001. The comparison confirmed full sequence matching. The BKA biology room's internal report stated, DNA profile from silver necklace matches DNA profile from historical blood sample #7B49 and current profile of convict Christian Bruckner. Probability of random match 1 in 12 billion. With these results, experts considered the forensic link between the suspect and the scene established at absolute probability. Concurrently with DNA analysis, the BKA's Image and Spatial Identification Unit processed the seized 16mm film reel. With support from the German Film Archive, all 340 frames were digitally scanned, brightness adjusted, and original colors restored. Images showed outdoor beach scenes with wide sand, white dunes, low palm rows, and tin-roofed wooden houses parallel to the shoreline. A geographic imagery expert team was invited to compare film terrain with historical records. By matching building structures, utility pole positions, and coastline features, they precisely identified the filming location as Jacksonville Beach, Florida, in the late 1940s. A key marker was a small church with a 2-story wooden bell tower in the background, constructed in 1948 and demolished in 1955, proving the film was shot between those dates. When comparing frame 118 with crime scene photos archived by Detective Harold Dempsey in 1949, the BKA noted clear overlaps in fence position, roof style, and lighting direction. Notably, in the shortest clip, a little girl in a red coat holding a light-colored cup walks along a sandy path connecting 2 houses, details fully matching witness Elena Vance's original statement. The final frames fade out, not showing the cameraman's face, but a reflection in the camera lens reveals the silhouette of a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat, medium build, matching the witness description of the stranger seen the night of the incident. All image data was compiled into a 64-page technical report with appendices comparing terrain and timeline. The analysis team's conclusion stated, 16mm film recovered from suspect's property was filmed at Jacksonville Beach, Florida, circa 1949. Visual evidence corresponds with scene description from case file #479B. Presence of a child resembling the victim suggests direct involvement of Christian Bruckner. To ensure authenticity, the BKA invited 2 independent experts from the University of Munich Forensic Institute to review all results. Both confirmed the examination met international standards with no statistical errors. In the joint report sent to the U.S., the BKA affirmed recovered evidence, including biological sample on the necklace and image data, proves suspect Christian Bruckner's presence at the Sarah Madeline Chen disappearance scene, Jacksonville Beach, 1949. Reliability meets absolute forensic standards. At the Jacksonville Cold Case Office, Detective Anna Vogt received copies of the results via secure communication. She updated the case file, marking the new status, forensic link established, DNA, and visual correlation. After nearly 6 decades, the biological data chain from a small sand blood trace and the little girl's name necklace was now tied to the specific identity of a man who once lived less than a mile from the scene. In the BKA's final report to the German Justice Ministry and FBI, the conclusion was written in a short but decisive line. Comprehensive forensic examination confirms direct connection between suspect Christian Bruckner and victim Sarah Madeline Chen through genetic and visual evidence. From that moment, the 1949 Jacksonville Beach case was no longer an unsolved mystery in cold storage, but a file with the first authenticated forensic evidence bridging 2 investigative eras between a small blood sample coded #7B49 and a man named Christian Bruckner. In September 2006, after forensic results were confirmed, the Braunschweig prosecutor's office authorized a formal interrogation of Christian Bruckner at the federal prison where he was serving a rape sentence. The interrogation room was set up in a high-security area, attended by 2 BKA investigators, a federal prosecutor representative, and an FBI liaison officer. The suspect, now over 80, appeared in gray prison attire, thin but still with cold, unreadable eyes. The session began with general questions about his past, work, and international travels. Bruckner answered cautiously, maintaining an indifferent tone, claiming he was just an ordinary mechanic who worked on fishing boats in various places after the war. When specifically asked about his time in Florida in the late 1940s, he paused for a few seconds, then said briefly, "I was there for a while, but nothing noteworthy." The investigator presented the DNA match results and showed him a copy of the examination conclusion. Bruckner glanced over it, lips pressed tight, silent. Moments later, the investigator pulled from the file a clear plastic bag containing the silver necklace engraved SMC and placed it in front of him. For a few seconds, his eyes changed. Though trying to stay calm, his right hand trembled slightly on the table. "Do you recognize this?" the investigator asked. He replied dryly, "No, I've never seen it." The interrogation lasted over 2 hours. Bruckner consistently denied any involvement, claiming the DNA could be mistaken or planted. When shown frames extracted from the 16 film, a little girl in a red coat walking along the sand, he was silent for a long time, then said, "That's just an old film I bought at a flea market." However, his voice began to waver. The investigators persistently presented each piece of evidence: the necklace's origin, DNA results, film location conclusion, matching 1949, Jacksonville Beach. Each detail was delivered like slow needles piercing through his calm facade. By the short break, Bruckner asked for a cigarette. Upon returning, he no longer maintained his cold demeanor, his gaze becoming distant. An investigator said softly, "If you tell the truth, at least you can free yourself after all these years." No one responded, only the sound of the lighter echoing in the room. He took a deep drag, flicked the ash, then looked straight at the necklace photo. "That little girl, Sarah Chen, right?" he asked. The room fell silent. The prosecutor nodded. He continued, "I didn't mean to kill her at that moment. I just wanted to take her away. Everything happened faster than I thought." From that point, the confession began to flow slowly, haltingly. Bruckner recounted that on a May evening in 1949, he was passing through the neighborhood near Jacksonville Beach after repairing an engine for a local fisherman. He saw the little girl playing in the front yard, her red coat standing out under the dim yellow light. He told her to take the cup to the neighbor's house, then pretended to ask for directions to strike up a conversation. When Sarah approached, he picked her up and carried her through the alley, leading to the sandy beach, where his small truck was parked. She didn't cry, just asked where we were going. I said to the sea to see the boats, he said, voice steady but low. He confessed to driving to the southern marsh area, which was very remote at the time, with no nearby homes. Bruckner paused multiple times during the recounting, sometimes covering his face with his hand. When asked what happened next, he replied quietly, "I lost control. I left her there, near the marsh, by a large old tree. I covered her with some sand and left. I thought the tide would wash everything away." The investigator requested a specific location description. He said, "South of Jacksonville Beach, where there's a turn onto a dirt road leading to brackish water. There are pine trees and a high mound from which you can see the sea." The investigators meticulously noted every detail, cross-referencing with 1949 topographic maps. The location he described matched a small marsh outside the residential area, formerly used by the military as a test site during the war and later abandoned. After more than 6 hours of interrogation, Bruckner signed the minutes confirming voluntary statements. The beginning of the record clearly stated, "Subject admits to kidnapping Sarah Madeline Chen at Jacksonville Beach, Florida, in 1949, describes burial location near the southern beach marsh." The entire session was recorded and backed up per German judicial procedure. Copies of the minutes and audio files were forwarded by the Braunschweig prosecutor's office to the BKA, then sent through official diplomatic channels to the U.S. Department of Justice and Jacksonville Police Department. In the accompanying report, the prosecutor noted, "Defendant Christian Bruckner has admitted his role in the 1949 Florida child kidnapping. Statements were voluntary, with details matching physical evidence and original files. Described burial site is specific, requiring on-site verification." After nearly 60 years, the questions left open in Case 479B received answers for the first time, straight from the mouth of the man who once left a small blood trace on the Jacksonville Beach sand. In late October 2006, after receiving the full interrogation minutes and Bruckner's detailed confession, the U.S. Department of Justice approved a coordinated search plan at the location he described. The Jacksonville Police Department, along with federal forensics and University of Florida geologists, was tasked with organizing verification excavation. The site was identified at the southern edge of Jacksonville Beach, in a marsh formerly part of old military land, now overgrown with grass and shrubs. 1949 maps showed the area was unplanned at the time, with only a few trails leading to the sea. Based on Bruckner's hand-sketched map during interrogation, the team cordoned a search radius of about 100 meters, using the large pine tree he mentioned as the central marker. On November 3rd, excavation began under humid, muddy conditions with light rain. The forensics team set up tents, dividing the area into numbered grid squares. They used magnetic scanners and geological probes to detect anomalies in deep mud. After 2 days with no clear results, on the third morning a metal detector signaled weakly about 8 meters from the marker tree base. Digging down over half a meter, the soil turned dark, mixed with fine sand. A technician discovered a small shiny silver object in the mud, a metal button with 4 intact holes, lightly corroded, but still showing traces of faded red paint. Nearby, in the same soil layer, the team found a small bone fragment, sized consistent with a child's arm bone. Digging halted immediately to document the scene. The surrounding soil was carefully expanded, revealing a few more scattered bone fragments, not in intact structure, indicating decades of decomposition and brackish water impact. All samples were retrieved with sterile tools, placed in specialized plastic containers, labeled with precise positions. An examiner noted, excavation depth 62 centimeters, clay mud base, organic material in high decomposition state. Every step was filmed and photographed per standard forensic protocol. All bone samples and evidence were transferred to the Florida State Forensic Lab for examination. There, experts first confirmed via anthropometry that the bones belonged to a child aged 3-4 years, matching Sarah Chen's age at disappearance. The button was also checked, copper-zinc alloy, style matching U.S. children's clothing buttons, produced 1940-1950. Under the faded paint, red traces remained, matching the coat color described by witnesses. Though indirect evidence, the coincidences were too clear, leading the team to believe they had found the little girl's final resting place. The most critical part was DNA testing. Scientists extracted genetic material from the porous bone, still retaining collagen structure. Classic PCR, combined with STR recombination, amplified short gene segments. After multiple processes, they obtained a comparable DNA sample. For verification, the lab used Grace Chen's mitochondrial DNA profile, stored in the state's genetic sample archive since the 1980s, when the family cooperated in missing persons identification efforts. Results were announced on November 27. Bone sample recovered at Jacksonville Beach excavation site fully matches Grace Chen's mitochondrial DNA profile. Kinship probability 99.99%. The 7-page comprehensive report from the Florida Forensic Institute concluded, based on genetic examination results, anthropometric characteristics, and accompanying evidence, there is sufficient basis to identify the recovered remains as belonging to Sarah Madeline Chen, born 1946, disappeared at Jacksonville Beach, Florida, on May 3, 1949. The report was signed by the laboratory director and sent simultaneously to the Jacksonville Police Department and the U.S. Department of Justice. In an internal press briefing, the lead investigator read the conclusion slowly. After 57 years, the victim has been found. Case file 479B was updated to status closed, full evidence. Physical evidence, from blood sample hash 7B49, the silver necklace engraved SMC, to the excavated remains, now formed a closed chain of proof, fully reconstructing the 1949 kidnapping events. The next day, authorities prepared the final storage minutes. The bones and evidence were sealed and transferred to the state archive per regulations. A copy of the examination results was sent to Germany for the BKA to supplement the international cooperation file. On the cover of the new file folder, the line read clearly, Case 479B, Chen, Sarah Madeline, identified by DNA, November 2006. After more than half a century since that summer night in 1949, the disappearance that once panicked the Jacksonville Beach community had a conclusion backed by irrefutable scientific evidence. The official investigation closed with the final forensic conclusion, remains positively identified as Sarah Madeline Chen. From a small bone fragment found under mud and a button with faded red paint, justice had reclaimed the identity of the little girl who vanished silently amid the Florida sea waves that year. In early 2007, after the remains examination and all forensic evidence were confirmed, the German Federal Prosecutor's Office formally charged Christian Bruckner with kidnapping, murder, and concealment of a body under Section 211 of the German Criminal Code, within the framework of international judicial cooperation with the United States. Since the suspect was a German citizen serving a sentence in Germany, the case was assigned to the Braunschweig Regional Court. This was a special trial, attended by U.S. Department of Justice representatives and an observation delegation from the Jacksonville Police Department, who had pursued the case throughout the reinvestigation. The trial opened on June 18, 2007, in Courtroom 2 of the court, a room built in the early 20th century with gray stone walls and a high ceiling. Christian Bruckner was escorted from Braunschweig prison, appearing in prison attire, face gaunt, hair white. The trial had no jury and was heard by a panel of professional judges. Presiding was Judge Karl-Heinz Romer, with over 30 years of experience in serious criminal cases. The indictment read by the prosecutor lasted over an hour, summarizing all events from 1949 to 2006, the disappearance of little Sarah Madeline Chen at Jacksonville Beach. Extraction results from blood sample #7B49, discovery of the silver necklace engraved SMC at the defendant's old house, and the confessed burial location verified by excavation results. Each section of the indictment included images, documents, and physical evidence. When the prosecutor held up the necklace in a sealed plastic bag, the courtroom fell completely silent. Evidence presented to the court consisted of 4 groups: 1 DNA matches between the blood sample evidence and the defendant's biological profile; 2 the 16mm film shot at Jacksonville Beach in 1949, confirmed to show the victim; 3 the defendant's voluntary confession at Braunschweig prison, recorded and authenticated; 4 excavation results of the remains and verification of the burial site. Additionally, the U.S. side provided copies of Detective Harold Dempsey's original file and the 2006 Florida forensic report as historical basis. Bruckner was given the right to speak after the indictment reading. He remained silent for a long time, then said softly in German, "I've said what needed to be said. I don't want to repeat it." The defense attorney only requested the court note that his client was elderly and weak and cooperated within his ability. However, when asked if he contested the DNA results, Bruckner only shook his head. "No, everything is as they say." In the questioning phase, the prosecutor projected the restored 16mm film. Images of the little girl in a red coat, walking on the sand, appeared faintly on the large screen, leaving many in attendance silent. Then came excavation site photos, marsh location maps, and 3D DNA comparison samples. The entire evidence chain was presented tightly, leaving no room for doubt. The BKA forensic representative affirmed before the court, "Probability of error in genetic identification is virtually zero." The prosecution's closing emphasized the exceptionally serious nature. The defendant caused the death of a 3-year-old child, then fled the United States, living freely for over half a century. No factor can justify that act, regardless of time passed. The defense offered no specific rebuttal, only requesting the court consider age and health factors. On June 25, the judicial panel entered closed deliberation. The verdict was announced that afternoon in a solemn atmosphere. Judge Romer read the decision. The Braunschweig Regional Court finds defendant Christian Bruckner guilty of kidnapping and murder of victim Sarah Madeline Chen, occurring at Jacksonville Beach, United States, in 1949. The act was determined intentional, with concealment elements, pursuant to Section 211 of the Federal German Criminal Code. Sentence: life imprisonment without parole. Upon hearing the sentence, Bruckner raised his head and looked straight at the judge, showing no emotion. He did not appeal or request a review. The attorney quietly gathered the papers. The verdict took effect that same day. U.S. Department of Justice and Jacksonville Police Department representatives issued a brief statement. Justice has been served, though belated. The 47-page verdict, fully detailing legal grounds and scientific evidence, was filed in the joint Germany-U.S. international records. In the final assessment, Judge Romer wrote, "A small blood trace in the sand from 1949, preserved across 2 generations, has led us to the truth. No amount of time can erase human responsibility for crime." With that ruling, the Chen, Sarah Madeline, Jacksonville Beach 1949 case was officially closed in the international judicial system, ending a nearly 6-decade journey from the night the little girl vanished on the Florida coast. In December 2007, 6 months after the life sentence without parole for Christian Bruckner was pronounced, the FBI and Bundeskriminalamt jointly issued an interagency report summarizing the entire investigation of Chen, Sarah Madeline, Jacksonville Beach, 1949. The over 100-page report was regarded as a model document in cold case investigations, detailing every phase from the initial disappearance, suspension period, to resolution after nearly 6 decades. The introduction emphasized that this was the first U.S.-Germany international forensic cooperation case fully resolved, using preserved biological evidence and modern DNA technology. The summary identified three main reasons the 1949 investigation stalled. First, severe post-war forensic technology limitations, no DNA testing, blood analysis, limited to grouping. Second, misdirection in suspect focus on neighbor Robert Mullins, overlooking the foreign resident factor. Third, lack of international cooperation mechanisms, preventing retrieval of information on the German named Christian Bruckner. The report assessed, had investigators at the time been able to test biological traces with modern methods or cross-check identities across borders, the case could have been solved in months. The next section analyzed factors enabling resolution after over half a century. The first and most critical was preservation of evidence, #7B49, the 1949 scene sand with blood trace. The BKA report noted, the glass vial sealed with rubber and moisture-proof aluminum foil inadvertently became an optimal DNA preservation method under Florida climate conditions. The sample's intact state, after 57 years, was considered a professional miracle. The second factor was advances in ancient DNA testing. The 2006 improved PCR technique allowed duplication of degraded gene segments, nearly fully recovering the biological trace. Finally, the decisive factor was the perpetrator's late confession. When Bruckner faced irrefutable evidence, he was forced to admit the act and reveal the burial location, completing the legal evidence chain. In the operational evaluation chapter, the report drew three major lessons for modern criminal investigations. First, every piece of evidence, no matter how small, must be preserved and fully documented, as its value may only be realized decades later. Second, international standard file storage and gradual digitization of cold cases are vital for successor units to access quickly as technology advances. Third, cross-border cooperation is decisive in cases with international migration elements. The FBI noted, without BKA coordination and the Interpol system, Bruckner's DNA sample might have remained dormant in German archives, never compared. The report also dedicated a section evaluating key individuals' roles. Detective Anna Vogt, who discovered and reopened the file in 2006, was mentioned as the investigator who awakened a case thought forever asleep. Detective Harold Dempsey's name, the first to collect evidence in 1949, was recorded in the appendix with the note, without his meticulous sealing and labeling of sample #7B49, justice could not have been served. Additionally, the report thanked the late archiving officer Earl Warren, who noted German mechanic, potential lead in 1959, a small detail but matching Bruckner's true identity. The timeline analysis in the appendix showed the case spanned 57 years and 6 months from disappearance to enforceable verdict, involving 3 generations of investigators and 2 legal systems. Forensic experts called it the case of memory, where a small piece of evidence passed through eras, finally finding voice through science. The report concluded, no technology can replace persistence and evidence preservation principles. That is the only bridge between past and justice. In the final section, both agencies jointly proposed issuing international guidelines on long-term biological evidence preservation, using the Sarah Chen case as a standard example. This recommendation was later adopted by the European Union and FBI in evidence storage protocols from 2008. On the report's last page, a bold line was stamped by both agencies, Case 479 Best Chen, Sarah Madeleine. Solved. Confession and forensic match. Below were signatures from the FBI Director and BKA President General, with a short note encapsulating the entire investigation spirit. A case is only truly closed when the victim is called by her rightful name. With that conclusion, the Sarah Madeleine Chen file, the 3-year-old who disappeared at Jacksonville Beach in 1949, was officially moved from unsolved cases to resolved cases in the National Archives, marking the end of Florida's longest justice-seeking journey in judicial history. In the spring of 2008, nearly a year after the sentence against Christian Bruckner took effect, the city of Jacksonville Beach held a solemn memorial ceremony at the seaside square, less than half a mile from where little Sarah Madeline Chen once lived. Hundreds of local residents, police and former investigators gathered under Florida's clear blue sky. In the small garden overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, a white stone marker was erected, engraved with the simple words, "In memory of Sarah Madeline Chen, justice found, though time has passed." Below in smaller letters, erected by the people of Jacksonville Beach 2008, the ceremony was presided over by the mayor, along with representatives from the Duval County Sheriff's Office and the FBI. A recording of the victim's mother, Grace Chen, was played, her voice trembling but calm. "I am no longer angry. I am only grateful to those who did not let my daughter be forgotten." The atmosphere grew quiet as the nearby church bell rang 3 times, symbolizing the 3 short years Sarah lived. Following the Braunschweig trial, the 1949 Jacksonville case became a focal point for forensic experts and international media. U.S. and European press simultaneously published articles about the longest investigation solved by DNA. Many legal journals regarded it as a historic milestone in cold case investigations, proving the value of long-term evidence preservation. The New York Times report at the time stated, "A vial of sand containing a blood trace forgotten for 57 years brought a murderer to justice." Science achieved what people in 1949 could not. The case's impact extended beyond the courtroom. In 2009, the FBI Academy at Quantico officially incorporated Case 479B into the cold case investigation and DNA forensics curriculum. In class, investigative students viewed copies of the original minutes, images of the SMC necklace, and sample hash 7B49, proof of the power of meticulousness and persistence. The course's first lesson quoted directly from the joint report, "No evidence is too small if preserved properly." From then on, many state police agencies began campaigns to review and inventory old cases, leading to dozens solved using DNA technology inherited from the Jacksonville model. For the community, the case revived the rare belief that justice delayed is not justice denied. Justice may come late, but it is never lost. Social organizations in Florida used the case as a symbol for movements to improve evidence storage procedures and support families of missing persons. At Jacksonville Police Headquarters, a small exhibit room was opened called the Sarah Chen Room, housing investigation photos, a replica of the necklace, and Detective Harold Dempsey's original notes. Beneath a black and white photo of the 1949 beach, a brass inscription read, "A case is never truly cold as long as someone remembers." The case's social impact extended beyond the local area. In 2010, the U.S. Congress passed the Federal Biological Evidence Preservation Act, recommending law enforcement agencies standardize evidence storage under controlled humidity and temperature conditions, inspired directly by the 1949 Chen case. The Senate Judiciary Committee report noted, "The lesson from Jacksonville Beach proves that properly protected evidence can become a silent witness for an entire century." In Germany, the BKA organized an internal exhibition featuring notable international cases, including a dedicated section called the Florida File. The actual necklace was displayed in a glass case, alongside replica frames from the 16mm film, The Little Girl in the Red Coat Walking on the Sand. On the wall behind was Judge Karl-Heinz Romer's note from the 2007 verdict, "A small blood trace in the sand crossed time to speak for those without a voice." Academia and media dubbed the Sarah Chen case the resurrection case, a revived investigation, proving justice can be reborn through the combination of human intellect and scientific progress. Forensic journals analyzed in detail the ancient DNA recovery process, considering it the standard for handling historical samples. Many European and Asian countries adopted the U.S.-Germany bilateral cooperation model to resolve long-dormant cases. In Jacksonville Beach, the Sarah Chen Memorial became an annual event. Every early May, local schoolchildren brought flowers to place at the marker. Older residents still recounted the story of the little girl in the red coat to younger generations as a reminder of justice's persistence. The city designated May 3rd, the day Sarah disappeared, as Child Victims Memorial Day. In the Jacksonville Police Department's final 2011 summary report to the Florida Department of Justice, the bolded conclusion read, "The Chen case stands as a reminder that time does not erase truth." Below the chief's signature was a note, "From a cup of milk, a grain of sand, and a single drop of blood, justice returned." The 1949 Jacksonville case, once forgotten among hundreds of old files, became a classic story of the intersection between memory, science, and human perseverance. It proved that in the world of investigations, no case truly ends if faith and justice endures. A silver necklace, a sealed sand vial, and a DNA sample rewrote history, not just for a forgotten 3-year-old girl, but for global justice systems. Today, when Jacksonville Beach residents pass the memorial marker, they can read the brass letters shining under the sun. Justice delayed, but never denied. That is the end of one case, and the beginning of belief that justice, no matter how many years late, can still find its way back to the shore where a child once vanished. The story of the Sarah Madeline Chen case in Jacksonville Beach in 1949 is not only a nearly 6-decade investigation journey, but also a mirror reflecting the enduring values of modern American society: faith in justice, persistence, and the power of science. A small sand vial containing a blood trace, carefully sealed by Detective Harold Dempsey in 1949, became a symbol of professional responsibility and ethics. Something every American, whether in policing, education, or healthcare, can learn from. In today's era, when technology advances faster than ever, this story reminds us that what matters is not speed, but accuracy and trust in the long-term value of right actions. If Dempsey had disregarded the evidence, if subsequent generations had not carefully archived the files, justice for Sarah Chen would never have arrived. The story also shows the importance of human cooperation and connection, transcending time and borders. It was the collaboration between the FBI and BKA that uncovered the truth, a valuable lesson in modern American society, where division sometimes causes people to forget that only together do we truly move forward. And finally, when Jacksonville Beach erected the marker with the words, "Justice delayed, but never denied," it was not just about one case, but a reminder to every citizen that justice and truth are never out of reach. As long as we continue to believe, protect, and pass on the right values to future generations. Thank you for following the journey to restore justice for Sarah Madeline Chen, proof that truth may be buried, but it never disappeared. Please subscribe to the channel to join us in exploring more cases thought forgotten, but still whispering stories of justice in the next video.